I just wish that for such a monumental life decision, such as finding out about pregnancy and should I be a mom, I wish I had just stopped and thought a little bit more deeply about what I was doing, what I was getting into. Because an outsider looking in our relationship and looking in all the conflicts, he hasn't gone to therapy. I'm still dealing with grief. I'm still dealing with X, Y, and Z. I'm the only breadwinner. It's a one income household. There are all these red flags all around me of yo, this doesn't seem like a good idea that you're bringing a baby into this.
I'm Kelty McGuire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Today's guest is someone that I came across on TikTok, and I saw one of her videos about romanticizing parenthood, something that we'll talk quite a bit about in this episode. And I thought, wow, spot on. And what a refreshing and realistic take and perspective on motherhood that we really don't see and hear much about. Megan Salez is a first-time millennial mom navigating single motherhood and content creation on top of a 9-to-5. She advocates for intentional parenthood after her mental health and quality of life suffered as a result of romanticizing motherhood. Megan says that parenthood is a beautiful path, but one that must be taken seriously since innocent lives are at stake. In addition to educating women, Megan's passionate about mental health, mindset mastery, and discussing healthy relational dynamics in the home. Hello, Megan. It's so nice to have you here. We were just saying it's kind of a fun thing to meet one of your TikTok friends in, quote, real life.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm. Virtual real life, right?
Virtual real life. It's all one and the same. Now, Megan, just to jump right into it, I'd love to hear a little bit about who you are. And also let's talk about this mom thing, because you are a mom. I want to hear about yourself, your daughter, where you're at. So
yeah, of course. So hi everyone, I'm Megan. So as Kelty mentioned, we met on TikTok. I had one video that really resonated with people. I didn't expect it to. I honestly was just venting because I was having one of those rough mom days, but I'm really glad that it sparked a really important conversation. And it's something that I hope to as I become more of a content creator, to speak more on this topic. But just who am I? Who is this random girl that Kelty has on this podcast? So basically, in 2021, I had my baby girl. And it basically changed my life in a lot of good and, just to be frank with you, in a lot of bad ways. A lot of ways I didn't expect. Before having a child, I was in a marriage. I was very relationship driven. I was very career driven. I loved to travel. I had all sorts of hobbies for myself. And one of the big things that I realized, and we'll probably talk more about it in this episode, was just how much of that shifted/disappeared and just changed in ways that I never expected after becoming a mom. And this was a lot of controversy in my video. People were like, well, you could have prepared for that. You should have researched that. You should have hung around more parents. You should have hung around more kids. And I know that I could have, but that was just one of the things that slapped me so hard in the face. After becoming a mom, I had severe postpartum depression. I lost my marriage. I lost my job. I lost all of my savings. So all of these things I thought I was basically invincible from, all of them happened to me. And I guess that was kind of the wake-up call for me, wow, this sucks, but is there something good that I can manifest from this? Because I'm a teacher. Kelty and I were talking about this earlier. I'm in the L&D industry. I love to teach and train. And I just felt like something within me, look, even if it's just 1 or 2 videos a week, could I speak about this really important topic? Because I know that I'm not the only one. I can't be the only one who is struggling with this. Should I have kids? Or and if I do, are we prepared enough for it? Because I feel at least where I'm from, I'm in America, we don't talk enough about the emotional side of things. Yeah, we talk about here's how to prepare for birth. But then after you give birth, what then? What resources are available? What about the woman's mental health? What about breastfeeding? What about her relationship with her partner? How do you bulletproof all of that to make sure that, both your child, but you as well as the woman, stay sane and healthy? I just feel I didn't have those conversations. I wasn't exposed to those resources before I gave birth. And there's a lot of self-blame too, right? And everyone on TikTok's well, you should have prepared more for it. And I know I should have, but at the same time, I romanticized it. I had my rose-colored glasses on. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. That's kind of one of the many, I have a lot of interests, but that's one of them that I do advocate for. And that is a common thread in the little TikToks and videos that I make that I'm hoping to, down the road, make longer form content. But I do advocate for intentional motherhood. Before bringing a child into this world, really think about these really deep, important topics. Think about the impacts on you, on your relationships before making such an important decision. So
yeah, that's incredible. And you're doing such a wonderful job of it. And I think a couple of things to say. most of us, we not, not all of us, but often what we teach are the things that we wish we knew ourselves, the support that we wish we had.
Yes.
And it's no surprise, but it does kind of give at least an eye roll, perhaps a few other reactions when you think about how easy it is for people to just sit in the comfort of their armchair and point fingers at other people and their choices, or maybe the lack of intention they had surrounding certain big decisions. And so I think it's really brave of you to be speaking to these topics. And I also know that, and I'm sure you've realized this, you're not alone in this. And what I find interesting with a lot of the women and people that I speak to is they are considering a lot of different facets of this decision to the degree that it can be overwhelming for them. But I feel like at the same time, they're probably overlooking some of what are the really important questions. Like they're getting kind of like bogged down in all the stuff that we see and hear about on the internet as far as the challenges of motherhood or these romantic notions of motherhood, which I want to actually get into in a moment. But they're not really like, I don't want to say it needs to be like this thorough process, but you seem to really, and maybe we can kind of like go through this like life cycle of, let's say, having a child. And I realize, I'm guessing your daughter is only 2 right now?
Yeah, she's 2 and like 2 months. So yeah, 2. 2.
Would love to talk a little bit about sort of how you arrived at where you are today. And maybe what we'll do is let's start with this decision around becoming a parent. And I'm curious, if you were to go back to your younger self, maybe your childhood self, like what, if any, idea did you have about a future with a child or becoming a mom?
It's interesting to me that you use the word decision. And I know for a lot of people, it's a very intentional decision where it's like they think a lot about it. They're very intentional about it. And it's so hard for me because I obviously was intentional about it. I prepared the best way I could, but I don't know if decision is the word I would use, simply because like as long as I can remember, as far back as I can remember, ever since I was a little kid, I'd always wanted to be a mom. And I can, as an adult, I can try to articulate to you why that is. I can, and again, I got a lot of critiques on this on TikTok where they're like, oh, you're blaming society. You're blaming society because they conditioned you. But again, I'm not the only one, because I see it in a lot of other women, right? Where they have this like rose-colored perspective on it. So it's hard to answer that. I've always wanted to be a mom. I remember just conversations with my friends in elementary school, middle school, high school, where we would just talk about this. Like, oh yeah, like I'm going to name my kids this. I'm going to have, 3 to 5 kids. Like I'm going to have 2 boys and 3 girls. Like I would just be so detailed about it because I was so excited about it. Like I was excited about the concept of, because I'm a very like loving and nurturing person. And I just felt like that was the natural life path for me. Again, it's what I saw around me, like get married, have kids, and live this life. So to me, that was a definition of success. Obviously, like growing up, I was encouraged to, I'm educated. I went to school, I have a master's degree. So I was encouraged to like pursue my education, but that was also like equally important. And like, it's what I saw in my family and it's what I saw in society was, yeah, get your education, yeah, get your career. But as a woman, right, it would be a shame if you didn't become a mom, right? It almost felt like unwomanly of me if I didn't become a mom. Right? Especially like when you're getting into your late 20s and 30s and everyone around you is having kids. I don't know, but that got to me. And also as someone who had suffered from a loss, my daughter isn't my first baby. Like I actually had another girl in 2019 who I lost through a stillbirth, unfortunately. That also really got to me, right? And I know everyone's story is complex and unique, but just the pressure of that, grieving that, feeling like I lost something that was owed to me, seeing all my friends in their 30s having families. And, I just felt like I was left behind. And I know that can be very immature. Like that shouldn't be the only reason why you have a kid. But I guess that's my long-winded answer to say it wasn't really a decision for me. It was something my whole life I've always wanted. And now that I have it, I love it, obviously. It's a mixed feeling, but there are lots of things that I really should have, thought a lot more deeply about it and the impacts to myself and my relationship.
Well, all the things you speak to, they are conditions and influences and narratives that I think most of us, specifically as heterosexual women in a partnership, if we come to marriage, and of course that's a narrative in and of itself, like how the rest of our life leading up to if we have children looks. But so many people do fall prey to this. And again, I don't think, I appreciate that your perspective is different now that you've had a child, but I don't think, if I can put my coaching hat on here, that you need to feel apologetic about like, oh God, like okay. I realize, I understand you've come under fire on TikTok, but again, like all of us feel this to a degree. And of course, women who are on the fence feel this as well. And they're like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to be on the outs. I don't want to be left out. I do want to have this experience. And they may not have had that like innate desire, which again, where does an innate desire come from? Like we're all a byproduct of the experiences we've had, like who we are biologically, like what our own relationship with our parents were like. So I think we can almost get kind of obsessive about like, why do I feel this way? What happened? Like, is this me or is this society? And no matter what we choose, it's always going to be the result of something. So yeah.
Yeah. You're right. That was very well said.
I feel like I went on a tangent. Okay. So how long had you been with your partner when you got pregnant with your first daughter?
I was 3 years.
And so for you, did it feel like it was time then, or what was that discussion like in terms of like, let's do it now?
Yeah. I'm trying to articulate it. Yeah. It just felt like time. Like, shouldn't we have a kid now? It's already been 4 years. Like, we've already been married this amount of time. Isn't there a term like sunk cost fallacy where if like you've invested this much time in someone, my husband and I, or my ex at the time, we've already gone through so much, like literally like all the life experiences, like loss, pain. We traveled the world together, and it just felt like the natural next step. Like, look, we've already invested this much time in each other. We've already been through all of these life experiences. The next step should be to have a child. And I talk about this in my videos, but it's this like societal concept of having a child or having a baby with someone is the ultimate form of love. That's how I interpret it. It's like, and I see that again, right, in like movies and pop culture. Like, because when I watched it in the movie, it's like, oh, that's cute. It's like the natural progression. Oh, they start dating. Oh, they get married. And oh, look, they have kids. It's cute. It's how things should be, right? It's what I've always seen growing up. So I just wanted that for me because it's like, I'm a human. I want the whole package. I want, the white picket fence and like living in a comfortable home with my husband whom I love and kids all around us. Like, to me, that was the definition.
Yeah. And would you say, I'd love for you to speak a little bit more. And I feel like you sort of hinted at it there, talking about this notion of it's the ultimate form of love and it's what you'd seen modeled and what, you talk about movies. It's like almost any romantic comedy, chick flick, whatever. Maybe that's not the going term these days. But any of these films typically end with books as well, and then 3 years later, 5 years later, a year later, along comes the baby. Like, it's very much part of that picture that's painted for us. So tell me about your romantic notions of motherhood and what you mean when you say, because this was actually the TikTok video, which, by the way, I will share this video in the show notes because it's so good and it's worth watching. Although I know we're going to get into it even in more depth today. This is a video in which you talk about that you subscribe to these romanticized notions of what motherhood was. So tell me about that a little bit more.
Right. So one of them was what I said earlier that, I'm putting quotes because it's like what's taught in our society. Having a child with someone is the ultimate form of love. Like, if you have been with someone for X number of months, X number of years, this is a natural progression, right? Like, it's the ultimate way that you show love. It is to share this experience of raising a child together. It's like, what could be more ultimate than that, right? So that's number one. Number two is, and again, I've seen this in like pop culture, having a child or having a baby will save a failing relationship. And I know not everyone agrees with that, but I've seen my fair amount, again, in social media and pop culture where that's like romanticized. Like, oh my gosh, look at this couple, they're fighting, but isn't it cute? They had a baby. And it's what united them. And now they're back together. And like, it's like the ultimate ending to a rocky relationship, to a rocky love story. And that was what I went through. Like, when we had our daughter, it was right after I found out that my husband had an affair. And that was like, and after the affair happened after I had just finished grieving my other daughter's death. So it was such a tumultuous time for us. There was a lot of conflict. There was a lot of like unresolved inner work. I was going to therapy, but my husband wasn't, because he just didn't believe in that. So it's like, I've since having that experience made other videos on just this kind of subtopic of like bulletproofing your relationship after kids. This is one of them. Like, this is one of the things to address is like, are we both emotionally prepared for this? Right? What could happen to us after we have like the groundbreaking experience of having a child? So I would say like there are probably more, but those are the top two kind of like fallacies that have influenced me, or that did influence me in having a child, is again, ultimate form of love. And this would save my failing relationship, because that was where I was at when I found out I was pregnant, and I had that choice, right? Like, should we keep it? Like, should we abort it? Right? And we decided to keep it because we're like, look, again, the sunk cost fallacy. We've already invested this much time in each other. We've already suffered a loss together. We've gone through this affair, but we want to give it another shot. So let's try raising a baby together. So again, some may call that immature, but that was where me and my ex were at.
So it sounds like, just to reiterate this, it sounds like your belief then was, yes, hopefully, fingers crossed, this will, and maybe the two things were, it wasn't necessarily that he had the affair and then you thought, okay, now I'm going to go have a child. But at that point, it was part of the plan that you were going to have a child, and he's having the affair, and then you find out you're pregnant. Did you hope that that would quote unquote save your marriage?
To be honest with you, there was like a little like seed of something inside me because I found out about the affair and obviously I was, devastated. I was on the cusp of leaving. I was at that point, like I was at that critical decision point of should I leave? Should I abandon this like 4 or 5 year relationship with this person? Right. And then I found out I was pregnant, like it wasn't planned. And so because I am religious, like, and I am spiritual, I interpreted it as like a sign from God, like, because I was looking for answers. I was like, God, what should I do? Like, should I leave because of the affair? But then again, people make mistakes. Should I give him a second chance? I was at this critical decision point. And when I found out I was pregnant, it was like perfect timing, right? Found out I was pregnant shortly after the affair. And I was like, maybe this is a sign. So I decided to go with that and just go with like, let's just see how it turns out because I've always wanted to be a mom. And, so again, looking back on it with like my rational glasses on, I feel like I could have done things a little bit differently, but that was just what my previous self felt like.
So that leads me into the perfect next question. What would you have done differently if you knew what you know now?
If I were to say this to like the average person, they might be shocked at this because like, obviously I love my daughter. I love that she's in my life. Like I love being her mom, but 100% like the right thing to have done would be to have walked away, which means I would never have, become pregnant. I never would have become a mom. I just had this, I don't know why, but I was just, and this is like my own deeper conflicts. And I've gone to therapy about this. It's like, I'm just so used to giving people second chances. This is a whole other subtopic of like relationships, but it's like, I just wish that for such a monumental like life decision, such as finding out about pregnancy and should I be a mom, I wish I had just stopped and thought a little bit more deeply about what I was getting into. Like, because an outsider looking in our relationship and looking in all the conflicts, he hasn't gone to therapy. I'm still dealing with grief. I'm still dealing with X, Y, and Z. I'm the only breadwinner. Like it's a 1-income household. There are all these red flags all around me of like, yo, this doesn't seem like a good idea that you're bringing a baby into this, right? Yes, it's romantic. Yes, it could save your relationship. Yes, it could bond you again. But is this such a good idea? And I didn't have that outside party telling me. I also kept it a secret from my parents because like I don't really have the best relationship with my parents. So I was essentially alone. I was alone in this little cone of like dealing with the affair, dealing with grief. Oh, I'm pregnant. I just wish that if I could just go back in time, if I could just clone myself and have like my 31-year-old me go back in time and talk to, 20-something-year-old me, I wish I could do that, right? But yeah, that's a hard question because I know for sure that means I wouldn't have my daughter here today, but that would have been the responsible choice to make for sure.
And you say, if I knew what I was getting into, what were you getting into? Tell us what happened next.
Oh gosh.
Whatever you're inclined to share.
Okay,
and by the way, I very much appreciate your openness, Megan. I'm sure this is going to be really helpful for people. And I know that you're open about your situation on TikTok, but thank you for talking with us so candidly.
Oh no, for sure. This is like my life's calling. Like this is what gives me fulfillment is to help people. No worries at all. So that's a funny question. It's like, what happened? Absolutely everything, right? And I know Kelty will link like my video in the show notes. I do go into that a bit more, but just to touch on like the broad categories, right? So I think the best way to look at this is looking at how my life was pre-kids and how my life is with kids. So pre-kids, I was independent. I had like a lot of hobbies. Obviously we all do, but I love to travel. Like I love to be able to just go and like leave on a whim. Hey, I want to go on a road trip. Hey, I want to travel here. I want to travel there. And that was originally what had like bonded me with my ex, was that love of travel, right? I was very career oriented. I had all these goals to like move up the corporate ladder, to just become a project manager. And I eventually wanted to like move to another country, have my own house. So I was very like, I had all of these dreams and goals. And with a child, again, and I reiterate this numerous times on TikTok, I'm not saying it's impossible to still have those things. It is possible. I see it all around me. I see women who are able to have the house, the nice house, the fancy job, the fancy car, able to travel, able to go to parties and socialize. I know tons of women out there are able to do that. But this is like my main message on my socials is, yes, it's possible, but you need the village. You need the support and you need the resources. And I know, Kelty, you had emailed me a question about like, there are a lot of women who do decide to go into this alone. Like they want to intentionally parent, to be a single parent. And I think that's great. But I would just say, when a baby is brought into this world, they're meant to be raised in a village. And like, if you look in cultures around the world, like I used to live in Korea, like I saw this, like you'll see this in a lot of Asian countries. And I'm sure like if you leave America, like you'll just see a lot of different ways that babies like how the community just gathers around the woman in postpartum. Because there is no way that a woman who think about it, all the physical duress that she went through to give birth to this baby, and she has to navigate breastfeeding and she has to heal. There is no way a single woman can heal, take care of herself and this little infant all on her own. We are meant to have a community. So that is the biggest takeaway that I just did not have a good grasp on before I had my baby. I just thought, because I was the independent, driven, optimistic woman, oh yeah, I've already handled all this other crap in my life. What? I can handle a baby, no problem. Yeah, I can work from home. Literally, I was I'll have my laptop here and be on work calls and I'll just have my baby in the bassinet next to me. I thought it was that easy. I really didn't think twice about it. So yeah, that is the biggest discrepancy is there are all these things you will lose in motherhood. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but it's the truth. You will lose your time. You will lose your independence. And that's why it's so important to have a village, because you can mitigate those things. If you have a partner, right? If you have grandparents, friends, a community, then they can help you with that. If you need to go to the gym, if you need to go hiking, if you need to go travel, you need that village so that you can reclaim those parts of yourself that you will inevitably lose. And I just feel we don't talk about this enough. I didn't hear it enough. I didn't have it drilled into me that I will lose my time and identity. And that you likely, 99% of the time, you will go through postpartum depression. Because naturally, you will lose sleep. And when you're operating on 1 hour of sleep, you will become depressed, right? All these things I thought I was immune to, they happened to me. So I don't know if that answered your question, Kelty, but it's so many things that happen when you become a mom that it's
All right, if you are struggling with the kids or child-free decision, I'm going to venture to guess that at some point you've worried that you might come to regret whatever decision that you make. This is something that I know kept me stuck for a really long time. I worried that by choosing to be child-free, I may regret not having kids. And of course, there's also that concern that if I would have had kids, I may have regretted that. If you're struggling with this as well, I want to invite you to download my free Navigating the Regret Thread class. This is a live class that I hosted a few months ago, and you can now download the workshop and check out 10 different perspectives and ideas on this notion of regret and how you can actually manage and navigate this threat of regret so you can make a really clear, feel-good choice that is not made from a place of fear, but rather from being aligned with what it is that you truly want. Go ahead and download the class at kidsorchildfree.com. I will also link to it in the show notes for today's episode, and I hope that you find the perspectives that I share helpful. I know the attendees have really felt it's helped clear the way, so to speak, so that they can make a choice that feels good for them.
We don't think twice about it.
You talk about some of the struggles, and I'm sure we'll get into them a little bit more. I'm curious, when you talk about some of those things that you lose becoming a mom, I'm sure there's people listening who would love to know, okay, but what's the upside? What do I stand to gain if I step into motherhood? So what has motherhood brought you?
Oh gosh, it is so profound and deep, and it's hard to articulate. I feel like it would be best in a poem or something, or a song, just because it's that profound. What has it brought me? Just this deep, innate gratitude, right? I would say resilience too. No matter what is going on around me, work is hard. I'm going through financial struggles. If my daughter comes in here and she gives me a smile or she gives me a look, or we're cuddling in bed together, I just forget all of that. It's I forget all the noise around me, and I'm just here in the present moment with this child who came out of me. And I feel like I could express this in a more profound way, but that's honestly the blessing that it has brought me, is that I'm in charge of this little girl, and I get to play a part into how she will grow up. And I guess it's just this excitement of wow, what will she contribute to the world? Because that was a big reason why I did want to become a mom, is I wanted to raise kids who were independent, who would, be creative and go forth and make a positive impact on the world. And I know it hasn't happened yet because she's 2, but I guess that's kind of the blessing. I mean, that would be weird if she went to college right now, right? But it's I know, because I can see signs, I can see her personality coming out. I can see she's very smart, she's very bright. And I'm just so excited to be her mom and to see what she will do, who she will become, what career she will decide to pursue, if at all, where she will travel to. I guess it's I'm so excited and I'm so honored to be the one kind of holding her hand along this path and just experiencing life. It's not for the faint of heart, but again, I mentioned earlier, that's just my personality. I'm a giver, I'm a teacher, I'm a trainer. I love to impart positive vibes into the world. And so just having a child and being able to play a part in her life and in her growth, I don't know. It's hard to find a word for it, but it's just gratitude, and just fulfillment. That's what it has brought me.
Yeah, I hear that in your voice and I see that in your face. If for those of you who aren't watching the video podcast, Megan's glowing. Listen, a lot of what you share on TikTok, and we've talked about thus far, we talk about some of those struggles or things to be aware if you're becoming a parent, specifically becoming a mom. And I want to get more into that and how women in particular can think about sort of like a safeguard, maybe not the right word, but how they can enter into motherhood intentionally, should that be the path that they choose. But first of all, one thing you shared in one of your videos and that I want to just touch on is that you mentioned, as much as you're trying to support women through these struggles that they may be having and helping them to enter into motherhood intentionally, you said ultimately this is about the child or the children that you will have, even more than it's about, like, not to dismiss the importance of the mother or the parent role. Tell me about that and why specifically intentional mothering and parenting you see as being so important to kids.
Right. So I speak a lot on this and I believe so strongly about this, again, because it's reflected in my own life. Had I, stepped back and approached my pregnancy and decided to have my daughter from a more intentional standpoint, ensuring that my career wouldn't be impacted, that I did have my village around me, that my relationship would be secured, hands down, her life would be better. I'm not saying her life sucks right now. Like she's doing well. Like I'm with my parents. Like I'm doing the best that I can for her. And I think me deciding not to have any further kids at this point is the best thing for her, right? Because I'm able to devote 100% to her. But I know hands down that had I secured these things a little bit further, secured them a little bit more, she would have an even better life. And isn't that what all innocent kids deserve, right? That's where I stand. And for people who are like on the fence, like, if the child is not here yet, like I just strongly encourage, like just make the world that they are going to come into conducive to like the ultimate best for them because they're innocent. And I feel like everyone can agree on this fact. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to be scientific. Like this kid, a kid is a kid. A baby is a baby. They're completely innocent. They're completely pure. They're completely untainted. And it is our job as the adults who are currently existing in this world with like rational brains and able to make adult rational decisions. I feel like it's our job and our duty and our responsibility to make sure, hey, I'm going to birth this soul into this world. Let me make sure I'm financially prepared for them. I'm able to like, give them like a nice life, that I'm able to give them all of their needs. It just makes me sad. Like when I see families and parents who are just like living paycheck to paycheck, like not able to provide the best food for their kids like growing up in poor neighborhoods. Like I know it's very complex socioeconomic factors. Like I don't want to speak to all of these intricacies, but I'm just saying from a broad perspective, I just feel like our kids deserve more. And if we can play any sort of role as the adults here, as the rational adults to prepare as much as we can for that, like me, right? Like I'm even blaming myself. I know I should have prepared better. I feel like we owe that to these innocent souls because they're not choosing to be born. Like we're the ones who are deciding to get pregnant and bring them into this world. So we owe them that. We owe them the best life.
I want to hear about what happens next. So you decide you're going to have your daughter, your second daughter. Your husband has had an affair. You hope that this will save the marriage, or that at least be able to repair things. So you have your daughter, and then what?
Right. So it was a blur. And I feel like any mom will tell you, like, who knows what happens in those first 2 months because you're not sleeping. So it was a blur. It was a mess. I will say my husband was there for me to the best of his ability. But again, this is where like a little bit of planning and thought would have benefited us because his job at the time, like when I was in my 9th month of pregnancy, he was starting to become or to get his license to be truck driver. And I don't know why I should have thought about like, how will that impact us? What is a truck driver's schedule? Oh, he's gone for 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I already talked about this. What does a woman in postpartum need? Support. She needs her family. She needs people to be there for her. So that's where I was postpartum. When I had my baby, he got like maybe a month off to be with me, but then after that, he had to work full time. So he was gone Monday to Friday and then weekends. I was basically alone all day long with this little newborn. Again, my parents were in another state. I didn't have any support. And I was, at the same time, was gearing up to go back to work. So I had all of this just mental stress on you. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm all alone. I have to take care of this newborn. I'm breastfeeding. How do I breastfeed? I was so stressed out, like low milk supply. That's a whole other topic on its own, but it's like sleep deprivation, navigating breastfeeding, lack of a village, the stress of like, I'm the primary breadwinner still, even though he's a truck driver, I'm still making more than him. And I have to keep not only him, myself, and now this baby afloat. The domestic tasks, people don't think about this. That's a whole other topic of like stay-at-home mom. But hey guys, it's hard. It's hard to upkeep a home, like chores and making food and groceries and meal planning. So back to what I said before, it takes a village for this reason. How was a woman to do all of that alone, right? So that's where I was. And to kind of fast forward that a bit, obviously that was not sustainable. I was in severe postpartum depression. I could not keep living like this. I think it was about 4 months in that I decided to reach out to my parents for help, which I told you before, we don't really have the best relationship, but I just felt like it was the right thing to do because they were my only family that was close by. I had to put my own ego aside, my own conflicts aside, because now it's all about this little baby. She needs the best. And I knew that where I was with our current situation, my husband not being home, me literally being alone all the time, that I needed to get her to a state of like, I need to give her more of a village because I cannot, as her mom, do it by myself. If I'm not taking care of myself, if I'm not sleeping, if I'm not eating, if I'm not exercising, I can't keep her alive. So it literally came down to her survival. And that was when I made the decision I need to move. I need to move to be with my parents. And it was hard because I'd already lost my job. I had to quit my job because I was so stressed out and chronically ill because of it. I basically just told my husband, hey, I'm going to do this. If you want to come with me, I really hope you do because I want our family to stay together. And basically, long story short, he wasn't down for it. He was attached to his job. He didn't want to leave the state. And that was kind of like the seeds of like what drove us apart. What ultimately led to our separation is that I felt like he was prioritizing himself more than the needs of me and our baby. And I don't want to point fingers, but that's my interpretation of the issue. I just felt like, hey, I'm doing what I need to do. I'm getting me and my daughter to a village because here we don't have a village. And he was like, well, we could hire a nanny. How? Where's the money? Right? I don't have a job anymore. Your income. And we were living in like a very, very like high cost of living city, high cost of living state. So to answer your question, that's where I'm at now. I'm still with my parents. The goal is to, eventually, hopefully move out, get my own place with my daughter once I'm financially stable. But to be honest with you guys, I don't know when that's going to be because childcare is expensive and I'm a single provider. And so that's where I'm at. And that's what kind of led to the demise, I guess, of me and my ex's marriage post-baby.
I just want to highlight for people listening, there's a lot that Megan's sharing that I think is going to be relevant for anyone. I also want to acknowledge you are living in the States where I'm a Canadian living in Germany. I can tell you between Canada and Germany, there's a really pretty big divide in terms of the amount of support that people get here when they give birth, everything from maternity leave to, the healthcare system, et cetera. And from what I understand, it's day and night between Canada and the States when the States being,
yes.
Again, I just want to highlight this for people who have not lived in the States or North America. Like it's really quite atrocious in terms of, that's probably putting it mildly, how little support new parents are offered for the first several months and few years of their child's birth and from there on forward. So you are, but specifically after the birth of your daughter, in a very challenging situation, not having a proper maternity leave, maybe not having the kind of protection or support to be able to like maybe take leave from your work if you were dealing with postpartum depression or chronic illness. So, and I guess it bears stating that these are things we have to consider. Like we need to consider practical elements. And while I find it terribly sad to know that there are people who feel unable to have the child they would like to have because they're not in the right circumstances financially, career-wise, not having the support of a partner or village, what have you, I think we need to contend with those things. We need to think about what is that going to mean? We need to get real about it. And of course, we can exert our influence on those circumstances to a degree, but we also need to come to the table and be like, okay, well, this is where things are at with regards to partnership, with regards to career, with regards to finances, with regards to that social net. So
yes.
Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah. No, that's basically like what I advocate for in some beautifully crafted sentences. It's like the problem with me, and like if you were to look at my story as a case study, is I just, again, the romanticization, this belief, this longing to like want to save a failing relationship. It's like I let all of these like emotional things cloud what should have been a very rational judgment. And I know having a baby is a very emotional decision. I'm not saying be a robot, but what you said, Kelty, was perfect because guess what? You do have to be rational because as I said before, it's a child. It's an innocent soul and we owe it to them. Like it's not even about me at this point. It's about them. Right? So we have to try our best to take off our rose-colored glasses, to take out the romanticization, and to just lay everything out on the table. And I talk about this in my video, like bulletproof your relationship after kids, like everything, relationship, domestic labor, like equal division of labor in the home. Like how does it look like now without a kid? Are you happy? Who's doing all the chores? Who's taking care of everything? Who's doing the mental load? Is it just you? if you're not happy in that situation, how do you think it's going to be when there's a baby in the mix, right? Do you think that's going to improve things? What is a career situation? Do you want to move up in your career? What if you're like me and you have to quit your job because you get sick? It's like, these are the things no one talked to me about. And the only way I'm able to speak on it now is because I went through it, right? And so it's like, I really wish someone would have just sat me down and just knocked some sense into me. Because again, that would have just entailed a better life for my daughter. Ultimately, it's about her. And who doesn't want, right? Like the best life for their kids. So,
okay, I've got two questions off the back of that. Now, first of all, you've mentioned this a few times that people, I mean, because I hear people say to me that, hey, I hear and see a lot about how motherhood being challenging and it's tough and struggle and this and that. And would you say those things weren't in your field of view or reference, or they were? So you heard these things. And what was your thinking before you had a child when you'd hear people say, hey, it's tough, or I'm not sleeping, or having a kid's a lot of work, it's harder than I thought? What came up for you then?
Right. So I love this question because, so there's this thing in, I hope I'm getting this right, but there's this thing in psychology, it's called confirmation bias. You may have heard of it, right? Where it's like, whatever you focus on, that's what you will see in your world. Okay, let's say that I lost my cell phone, I dropped it in the toilet. What am I going to notice in the world around me? People on their phones, right? Because I'm hyper-focused on that. So it's like, that's how motherhood and wanting to be a mother was like for me. I only followed the mom influencers and the people who portrayed motherhood in a positive way. Why would I watch someone who was complaining and bitching about motherhood? Ew, I don't want to watch that. Like, what does that do for me? I want to be a mom. I want to have like the perfect pregnancy. I want to have like decorate the nursery with like, the pretty pink bows or whatever. So those were the people that I chose to follow. That was the content that I chose to consume. So I knew, like, just like with like child-free people, right? Like I know child-free people exist, but I don't want to look at that. I don't want to think about that. I know that, tough motherhood exists, breastfeeding is hard, but why would I choose to consume that? No, I want to curate my content to like what makes me feel good. And I want to be a mom. And so that was like what I chose to surround myself in. So to your question of like the Debbie Downer, it's like, oh, life is going to be hard. You can't travel anymore. Your career is going to be impacted. I blocked it all out. And yeah, but that's the thing. It's like this topic has to be approached with like the right mix of emotion and rationality. Because I say this over and over again. It's not impossible. You still can travel. You still can have fun, but you need the right support system, right? So that's what I should have like focused on, was not so much like what I can't do, but what do I need to put in place around me so that I can still do what I can do? But instead, I just shut it out completely. And that wasn't the right approach.
And I agree with you. I think it's a balance. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, as you say, curating, in this case, your social media feed, but like curating your environment and your messages to reinforce the things that we want to experience and believe. Like, for example, if you're fearful about childbirth, I don't see reading and watching horror stories about all the things that can go wrong is going to be very helpful. It's like, rather, can we consume messages about how it can be a really beautiful experience, or people having relatively painless, pain-free experiences? Sound like you can hardly imagine that. But I think we're going to have a future guest on that's going to talk about that. That is within the realm of possibility. Yeah. I have a guest who I'm hoping we're going to talk about hypnobirthing. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Okay.
So, I was going to do that. I was going to do that. Yeah. But I didn't have time for it.
It sounds like you had a lot on your plate. So
yeah.
I think something else you also shared to the effect that like thinking these things didn't necessarily apply to you is almost like, okay, yeah, sure. It's other people's problems, right? Like, sure, other people are going to struggle, but I'm not going to struggle. Would you say that was the case as well?
That was it. You summed it up in a nutshell. I don't know why I thought I was so special. I guess it was just like, again, my personality, like everything else in my life, I'd always been able to achieve like independently without the help of other people. So I just thought like with this whole childhood, like having a child and motherhood thing, what's the difference? I can figure it out because I figured out everything else in my life up to this point. I've been through all the tough shit. So it's yet another step in my journey that I'm able, like, being optimistic is not a bad thing, like, but it should have been tempered with some rationality.
And you are figuring it out, and you do have resilience. But I agree that we also don't want to stick our head in the sand. And let's face it, most people, we hear the stats on divorce. Everybody thinks they're going to be in the 50% that stays married. Of course, like it's part of how we are as humans, and there's something protective in that. But I love how you're shedding light on your own sort of misconceptions or preconceived notions, because I think there's probably a lot of people listening who can relate to that. You shared you kind of like in Spitfire fashion shared a few different questions that, you could have or should have been thinking about. And there's something that you shared in another one of your videos that I love, which you call the Devil's Advocate questionnaire for becoming a parent or for intentional parenthood. I'd love for you to tell us what that is and maybe share like 2 or 3 or 4 of your favorite questions that you suggest people ask if they're thinking about becoming a mom or a parent.
Right. So that little list, it's basically a list of, I would say, 9 to 10 questions or just considerations, prompts to think about, to make sure that you have a thorough answer for it, that you have a plan, a system in place, so that if those things do happen to you, your world is not going to be rocked. Again, inspiration is my life. Inspiration is my life as a case study, because look at what happened to me. I didn't think I could become single. I didn't think I could lose my job after being the primary breadwinner and having a successful corporate career for so many years. I didn't think anything could happen to me, right? Yet they did. And so that was the inspiration for this questionnaire, because it's what I wish someone would have showed me, but my 26-year-old self. Like it's what I needed at the time. And so I made that in the hopes that it would help people just kind of, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about what would happen to me if I had multiples. What would happen to me if I did lose my job? And I'm the primary breadwinner, like Megan is. So that's the list. My favorites are the ones that, as I said before, I thought I was immune from. So becoming single, that was a big one for me. Like I have always been a relationship girly. Like before my ex, I was in another long-term relationship. It's all I know. Like being single is weird to me right now, right? But that's why it just wasn't even a concept in my mind. I was like, yeah, like we're gonna have a baby. It's like we need to share this experience together. It didn't even cross my mind that I could become single. Losing my job didn't even cross my mind that I would get to the breaking point so bad that I would volunteer to quit my own job. It wasn't even that they laid me off. I had to take myself out because I didn't have enough time to recover, because I only got like a month and a half of maternity leave, right? So those are my personal favorites, just those 2, just because like those are 2 big things that will impact your life and the life of your baby. Is your financial ability, right? Because obviously your career, having a job means providing financially for your child, and your relationship status, because of what I said before, you need a village. If not a village, at least a loving, supportive partner who is in it with you like 100%. Losing just those 2 things alone, even like disregarding the other questions on my list, just those 2 things alone, if you're not prepared for that, and if you don't have a plan for if those worst case scenarios happen to you, like I don't want to curse on this spot, but you're
allowed to curse on here. Yeah.
Like you are like, yes, you're fucked. You're fucked if you find yourself single and jobless. Okay. So that was kind of the goal that I was trying to send out, again, in the hopes of just helping people who are like, should I have a child, or I'm pregnant, but can I prepare a little bit more for this? Again, the goal to provide the best life for your kids.
A couple more questions I want to ask you, one of which, let's just talk about the single piece one more time, because I think you shared a really nice piece of advice, which is if you're single, I mean, for anybody considering having a child, but especially if you become single, how important that support system, the village is. Is there any other advice that you would give a person who is thinking about going it alone, who's thinking, I don't have a partner or a loving relationship that I would have a child with, I'm thinking about doing this on my own? What advice would you give them?
Right. That's a good question. So obviously the village, we did talk about that. Just it's a no-brainer. Like, how are you going to have time to eat, take a shower, exercise? Like, you need someone there with you. Like, if it's not a partner or a spouse, do you have family? Do you have friends? Right. And outside of that, it's kind of similar to the village, but I want to say community. Having just friends, even if they're not able to help you in your child rearing journey, just having someone to vent to talk to, because that's something else about motherhood that has really impacted me, is just how isolating it can feel. Like if I were to talk about, the struggles of breastfeeding, for example, to someone who's never been a mom, who's never breastfed, they're going to be like, yeah, that sucks for you. Like, why should I care? Like, I haven't experienced that. So it's really important to find these outlets for yourself, village and community. So village to help with the child rearing aspect, and community to help with everything else, like emotional, like mental, being able to vent, having friendships, social experiences with other moms or parents or what have you. Just because without those 2 things, like I feel like you will die. Like maybe you'll be operating, you'll be functioning as a human, but you won't be your best self. And ultimately, again, coming full circle, that will affect your child. Like if you're not having the time to exercise, to eat well, to hang out with other mom friends and just do something outside of the home, outside of your day job, that's going to affect you mentally. And then your child will sense that. and it's going to affect your ability to be a good parent.
Okay. And so the second question I want to ask is, you talk quite a bit about sort of like safeguarding your relationship, so to speak, and also potential red flags that may indicate that your relationship is not in a great position to bring a child into. So what would you advise people in terms of what they might consider if they are in a partnership with someone that they're considering having a child with? What should they be mindful of?
Great question. And I do have another video on this that I did ping to my TikTok. It's called Bulletproof Your Relationship After Kids. But essentially just listing things off the top of my head. Emotional maturity, right? If your partner doesn't demonstrate that, he or she, if they don't demonstrate the openness to, hey, if things do go down south, like, am I willing to go to therapy? Am I willing to involve a third party? Am I willing to get outside help? If they don't demonstrate that desire or that willingness to, that's a red flag, because I would say 99% of the time shit will go down when you have a kid, right? So what are you going to do if shit does go down? Growth mindset, because you will be learning things along the way. I think we discussed in this episode, like, you cannot possibly prepare for everything. You can try, but unexpected things will happen. How will your partner cope with that? The ability for your partner to support you in all aspects postpartum, in all aspects like domestic and career, all the little things, right? And this will look different for everyone, but it's like, if I want to breastfeed, like, that's going to be a very taxing journey. How are you going to support me in that? If you want me to be a stay-at-home mom, like, but I'm working or what have you, like, that is taxing. How are you going to help me in that? So it's like being mindful, not just of the baby's needs, but of your partner's needs, because their life or the woman's life, whoever is birthing this baby, their life will change in so many ways. And if your partner is not aware of not only the physical impacts, but the emotional as well, like that's what I was lacking, is like, my ex knew, okay, she gave birth, she's healing, but that's it. He didn't know anything about breastfeeding. He didn't know how I was impacted in my career. He didn't know the emotional things I was going through. And ultimately, if those aren't discussed in the partnership or the couplehood or whatever, then ultimately, like, it's not going to work out, because having a child is like the hardest thing you could put your relationship through. So definitely those things have to be discussed.
What's one thing that you think would make this kids or child-free decision easier for women that are who are on the fence right now? So what might help, whether it's something like societally speaking, whether it's something in their own hearts and minds, what might make this a little bit easier for them?
I would say gather experiences and stories from real life people. You can only Google so much. That's what I did. I just Googled and read books and took courses, but ultimately it's speaking to people like me or you, real life people, real life moms, real life people who decided not to have kids, because that will serve as the best like intel for you. Yeah.
What's one thing that you want women without kids to know?
You guys are awesome and you're fantastic, and I support your decision. And that's something I will be teaching my daughter, is that a child-free life is just as viable an option as being a mom. I was not taught that as a girl growing up, and I'm so excited to teach that to my daughter.
I love that. All right. And last question, and this is a sort of a different spin on, but I know you've addressed this to a degree, but I'm going to ask you for one more piece of advice on this. And that is, if you could give advice to one person who's currently on the fence about whether or not to have kids, what would that advice be?
Ooh, man. Just trust your gut. I know that's cliche, but it's like going back to myself. I knew deep down inside that there were red flags around me, but I chose to ignore them. So ultimately, your gut will know, right? What is the right thing to do? Am I bringing the best life for this child, for myself? Am I in the right place to do this? Trust your gut. Your gut coupled with experiences and stories and intel from other people, ultimately, and like conversations with you, like clarity coaches such as you, perfect recipe to make like an intentional decision, for sure.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a great conversation. I am going to be sure to link to those couple of videos we referenced, the Romanticizing Motherhood video, as well as the Devil's Advocate questionnaire. Where can people find you? And do you have anything that's coming that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah. So I only have 2 socials really. So I'm on TikTok. You'll find those in the show notes, right? Kelty will link that. But I'm also on Instagram. I'm not as present on there, but it's meg.sales.0514. Again, it's my birthday. Not that creative. Couple of projects. If you decide to follow me or stick around, I'm hoping to create a couple courses
we'll link to
just
it.
helping moms in postpartum and helping couples, again, prepare for a baby. So those are kind of 2 courses that I hope to make soon. And I do have a podcast coming soon if you decide to stick around for those.
Well, I look forward to checking those things out. Probably not purchasing the courses, because I think I'm pretty good on my child-free path. Yeah, but those are going to be fantastic resources. I think you, speaking from the experience of having gone through the fire, you're going to be really well informed about what what people are needing when they're going through this process of having kids, and definitely look forward to tuning into the podcast. So thank you so much, Megan, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Kelty. It was so good to meet you. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in for this latest episode of the Kids or Child Free podcast. Now, before you go, I have a little something to share with you, and that is I want you to go check out the free resources page at kidsorchildfree.com because I have some goodies on there for you, guides you can download. I've got a recording of a class that you can check out, different tools, exercises, resources to help support you to make the kids or child-free decision that's right for you. I will link to that in today's show notes. And again, you can also find that at kidsorchildfree.com. That's all from me. I wish you a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you back here very soon.